Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, there. Oh, now we got it working. Hey, how you doing, everybody? Thursday, September 25th, 2025 is as good a time as any to come in and do another show, don't you think? I don't know. That was a weird start to everything. Hey, 2525, that will earn you almost $0 in the lottery. I need to give you a different number. So try 52, I suppose. Throw a 9 in there and send a cut of the profits. And while you're at it, we'll catch up with the news today. We'll do our best. Greg Dworkin is in the middle of construction. And are you listening, contractors who are working inside the Dworkin home today? This is on you. We're desperate to get this bathroom finished, though, so you can give Greg back to us. But this has happened in our house before. Obviously, we understand. Progress needs to happen. Things need to move forward. People need to get jobs. We need to get jobs done in this country, and it's not socialism either. By the way, that too. Not sure where I was going to start today because the news once again overflowing. We caught you up in great detail yesterday, I think, on the discharge petition, so you'll be able to argue with all the pedantic weirdos you want about discharge petitions and what can and can't happen with them and where they're likely to derail. And I guess, therefore, the full meaning of what it actually means to have put 218 signatures together. We're not sure yet. You got to wait and see. But there were a number of other things that happened over the past couple of days that were fully ridiculous and got less than the attention they deserved yesterday. And then, of course, a new flood of new materials happening, as always, and just pouring in over the sides, I guess. All right. Where to begin? I don't know. We ought to just plunge right in. We're missing Greg and his organizational skills. Although there were a couple of stories I noticed in his queue yesterday that I don't think we actually did get to, although they looked intriguing and well worth our time. Although maybe I should save them because they are medical in nature. And he cast them over the side out of necessity in order to make room for some of the other crazy stories we spent our time in. But yes, the Maha movement inside the Department of Health and Human Services and then spreading outside and affecting your life and taking away your medicines are up to no good, of course, up to and including, let's see, making it virtually impossible to get childhood immunizations done correctly unless the medical establishment simply ignores government guidelines, which I guess that's where we're going to be. And as a result, all the other people who have always ignored government guidelines when they were good now feel like they have permission structure to ignore government guidelines when they're bad. But if they haven't become bad enough, they can still ignore them. For instance, let's have ivermectin changed into a human medication and dispensed over the counter. Apparently that's next on their list. I don't know. But if you, as a good medical practitioner, want to ignore government guidelines and do the right thing and ignore bad government guidelines, I guess it's yet to be seen whether this government will bring its power down on your head and try and enforce the badness, or simply look the other way and say everybody can practice however they want. I doubt that happens. Maybe it happens if you don't spend your time also speaking out and or giving money to their political opposition in order to restore a good and working order HHS. But if you just do your own thing, maybe they won't notice you. I don't know. However, it is actually incumbent upon you to speak up and allow us to fall into rank behind you and take this on head on. Ignoring it has never made anything go away, but it's an incredibly brave thing to do, to have to be the one who stands up for medical science, which the truth is most people still believe in it. This is a very vocal but very definite minority who are invoking these, pulling the levers we've given them, unfortunately, through the electoral process and trying to ruin everything while they have license to do so. And that, too, is a theme throughout what's going on today. One of the other things, I guess, up for discussion and interpretation and parked in, some of it's parked in Instapaper, some of it is spread out across the Blue Sky feed today. And as a matter of fact, let me jump back to Blue Sky so I can scroll back through this stuff. I happened to see, I jumped into the middle of what was, I guess, a thread, a discussion of, all sorts of things here by Jonathan Katz. Did I move into the middle of it? I mean, I think so. I don't know why it's not bringing me the previous things in the thread. Here we go, gotten up to the front. But Jonathan M. Katz, because, he bothered to put the middle initial in there. We'll tell you what it is. Author of Gangsters of Capitalism, as it happens, and The Truck That Went By, which I can't say I'm familiar, but I can say I'm familiar enough having seen Jonathan Katz on the interwebs before, and he makes an excellent point here, and it makes it more rationally, calmly, academically, an organized fashion than I make it, but he intrigued me with, I thought, the second comment in the thread. The first is he is commenting on something that made the rounds yesterday and disappointed everybody, which was an article in The Atlantic. And every once in a while, The Atlantic redeems its reputation for weird navel-gazing both sidesism and has a really good streak, and people subscribe and say, I can't miss out on what's coming out in The Atlantic, and then it all comes roaring back. For instance, in this piece, left-wing terrorism is on the rise, it claims. It's an article by Daniel Byman and Riley McCabe, whom I do not know. And perhaps, I guess, no, there's no link to the article in this first installment here. Maybe he links it later on, but I think he's generally trying not to drive people to this thing. This is interesting, too. Earnest America responding to him. It does say, I suppose it doesn't, although I happen to know that this was in The Atlantic, and you can kind of tell from the typeface, etc. And yesterday I saw it with a screen cap of the title, but with, I guess, probably The Atlantic also appearing on screen somewhere. So people are a little confused today. This one doesn't happen to include it. But putting aside the researchers' inability to identify acts of state terrorism, which is an important subject these days, the number they're using to justify this subhead is 5. That is to say, the subhead of left-wing terrorism is on the rise. How so? What do you mean? Subheader reads, for the first time in more than 30 years, attacks by the far left outnumber those by the far right. And I guess, is the number they're talking about 5? Does it outnumber those from the far right by 5? Or is it that there were 5 attacks in the and how, whatever the time period is, classified by these guys anyway, as attacks from the left? And of course, we're watching in real time attacks being perpetrated and being labeled as far left when they're either just flat clearly not, or whether there's some question, or in some cases where the evidence actually points to the right, but people on the right would prefer that they came from the left, so they just redefine it as left. It's just, the whole thing is an interesting phenomenon, and the fact that The Atlantic gives voice to it is troubling as always. And Katz takes the first excerpt here and presents it to us, and it reads, I have to get the alt text. I know it's a wonderful tool for people who can't otherwise see the visuals, and I can't and won't discourage you from using the thing. I question the way Blue Sky presents it. It's interesting in that it's sort of alt text forward, which is an option. And I guess for those who actually use alt text, and it's the smart way of doing it, and it's the courteous way of doing it, and it presents the alt text. If I want to see the picture or the screen cap, and I enlarge it, and I go to read it, but then the alt text goes up over it, and I have to get rid of the alt text in order to read the thing. Well, it's an annoyance, and I'm sure maybe there's a way of setting it somewhere so that it doesn't do that, and that would be the actual answer to this. But even so, you just have to live with it, and the reason is because the people who actually need the alt text can't be fumbling around looking for the buttons and bringing up alt text every time. It's much more courteous to just say, here's the alt text. If you don't need it, one click will get rid of it. But it is kind of like, I'm trying to read something. Get the thing I'm reading out of the way of the thing I'm reading. It's just a little odd. All right, a little bit of a womp womp gripe there, but never mind. This year, however, this is an excerpt from the piece we're talking about, and we're not beginning to talk about it yet. Let's get around to it. This year, however, violence on the right has plummeted. Okay, sure. Only one right-wing terrorist incident occurred in the first 6 months of 2025 that I'm going to tell you about, because other ones have happened. The June assassination of Minnesota State Legislator Melissa Hortman and her husband and her dog, and the shooting of another one, and the plans to shoot all the rest of them. But never mind all of that. This extraordinary drop-off is too recent to allow for any definitive explanations, and the number of terror incidents often fluctuates over short periods, but Trump's re-election could be a key factor. Yeah, his victory deflated election conspiracies that had once motivated many extremists. Okay, that's an actual maybe valid point. Since then, Trump has taken a maximal approach on some of the far right's highest priority issues, particularly immigration. Enrique Tarrio, the former Proud Boys leader and convicted seditionist whom Trump pardoned, recently summed up the president's potential psychological effect on the violent far right. We won. We've got what we wanted. That is no doubt a factor in all of this, and it's an interesting explanation for some of it. But to put it more succinctly, as Jonathan puts it, they joined the government, my dudes. That's the reason for the supposed drop-off in right-wing terrorist violence. Of course, another reason for the drop-off of right-wing terrorism is that we've, in many cases, just redefined. This isn't right-wing terrorism. This is government policy now. It used to be that if you sat around plotting to kidnap someone you didn't like off the streets and disappear them, like, let's say, the governor of Michigan, that was right-wing terrorism. However, if the person you don't like is just a brown neighbor, now you can disappear them off the streets with kidnapping and say, it's ICE doing it, and I was doing it for the bounty, or whatever, or it's legal now. Just as bootlegging dropped off precipitously after the repeal of Prohibition, golly, there's no definitive explanation for why people aren't cooking alcohol in stills and driving it around and fighting the cops to distribute it. Well, there is. And that's the reason. And, of course, now, another methodology, of course, available to them, and they took full advantage of it. If you say, all right, well, invading the Capitol and pummeling the police and attempting to kill all federal lawmakers, if that's what passes for right-wing terrorism, have I got a story for you. It's actually patriotism, because nobody who did it is in jail for it anymore. They've all been given presidential pardons. So, that'll tip the scales. And of course, right off the bat, only one incident of right-wing terrorism. Are you sure? Because somebody machine gunned the CDC building not that long ago and killed the cop guarding the place out front. But, it happened maybe it happened too close to publication date. I don't think so. This is a magazine. I think they could have fit that in. But they just ignored that one. It's unclear. Or, I don't know, one guy who did a thing wrote a confusing message on the bullet so that we wouldn't know whether he was right-wing or not. And therefore it's left-wing. Or at least definitively not right-wing. And this writing on the bullets thing is not a real help in terms of figuring out what's going on. We've got another such incident happened yesterday during the show. You've heard about it by now, no doubt. But down in Texas, another kid that seems to be turning up as one of the black-pilled, alienated weirdos, and who killed himself afterwards, more in fitting with the pattern, the usual pattern, rather than actually getting yourself caught or turning yourself in. This is a new sort of thing, but shooting yourself afterwards is kind of par for the course. Has taken aim at an ICE detention facility, but if he's supposed to be a left-wing terrorist, took very poor aim at the detention facility and fired and I guess hit 3 people, killing 1, I think, were one, and seriously injuring 2 others, but shooting detainees, not ICE officers. And in order to make sure that we understood the government's point of view on this, the FBI has helpfully shown us that they found some bullets near where he had shot from, some unspent rounds, and on the jacket of these rounds, these cartridges, was again inscribed, although not engraved, rather written with what appears to be something like a gel pen or a ballpoint pen. One of these bullet casings had one message on them, and it said simply, anti-ICE. And so the government, folks have run with it in their direction, the ideological direction. Oh, this guy was anti-ICE. That's why he was shooting all of the people that ICE was arresting, because he totally didn't believe in their mission, or something like that. Or whatever. Or it's not anything else. Couldn't be anything else. Couldn't be irony. It couldn't be that he's anti-ICE. That would be their interpretation. It can't be that he considers himself the anti-ICE, and I don't want to process and deport people. I want to kill them instead. That would be a right-wing interpretation of these things. Well, plus, of course, the dark irony interpretation that the black-pilled crowd appears to be so interested in. But beware pronouncing your findings about the black-pilled crowd, because even if you were actually right, they would just tell you you were wrong and do something different. Anyway, it's just odd. And you shouldn't discount the fact that if you wanted to tell the story of right-wing terrorism being down and left-wing terrorism being up, 1, you could just claim everybody's left-wing terrorist, and 2, ignore all right-wing activity, kidnappings on the street, violence, pushing people to the ground, hitting them over the head, disappearing them, God knows what else, torturing them, delivering them up to others to torture them. But if you do it all saying, I'm doing it under color of law, I've been recruited by ICE to do it, my favorite hobby is now paying me, and you don't count those things as right-wing terrorism anymore because they're being sponsored by the government, well, as the writers hint, they're aware of this. There's no way to, or as Katz says, it's difficult to identify acts of state terrorism. I almost gave credit to the writers here. It was Jonathan Katz, though, who says, putting aside their inability to identify acts of state terrorism. He's got more to say and more excerpts. For instance, he says here, calling Mangione, Luigi, you remember Luigi Mangione, a leftist is still a huge citation needed sort of moment. This citation for the second Trump attempt at assassinating him, I guess, offered in this article, says, quote, there is little public information about the most recent shooter. Note, he did not shoot, nor does he seem to have even attempted a shot. That sounds like a pretty serious gap in the logic. Anyway, lots of other people were concerned with the way this was put forward, and it's a big topic of discussion today. So I thought we would put it. But yeah, apparently writing messages on the bullets now is either actually happening and a helpful view into their motivation. It could be actually happening and not be a helpful view into their motivation. It could be actually happening and intended as a misleading view into their motivation. And then, of course, there's the whole set of things where it's actually not happening and instead, they're finding unused ammunition, and somebody like Kash Patel is saying, hey, write an anti-ICE message on there so that we can announce to everybody this is another act of left-wing terrorism. This was the joke all day long. And the creative minds at the FBI said, you want me to write an anti-ICE message on this bullet? All right, anti-ICE. And then that's it. And golly, if that doesn't, that would explain it for sure. All right. I guess I'll note for the record without diving into it, but the New York Times has put together another of their famous roundtable discussion focus groups on Trump voters again, although at least this time it's not old Trump voters in diners. Are you still for Trump, even though none of the things he promised you have happened, and in fact a lot of the opposite things have happened, and it's really hurt you a great deal? Doesn't matter to me. I love him. This time it is young voters, and the thing that they were looking for is, aren't you growing disenchanted with Donald Trump? And most of them said yes. Then they explained why, and so I guess it's a change of pace, but I have a feeling that it's just as frustrating, and that it'll be rather annoying as we hear from people who are relatively disengaged politically, saying things that are obviously wrong or backwards interpretation of what's happening. But we have to sit alongside and listen to them because they've got votes. I haven't reviewed it, and I haven't even seen a lot of people complaining about it. I just want to know for the record, it's there. Usually people will be talking about those things, and we'll get around to it. And usually it's, just bitter disappointment with the state of reality when we find out what our fellow citizens are thinking. And I have a feeling it'll be much the same in this instance. All right. On to a little more organized writing about the things that have happened. Here's another item up for discussion about yesterday's shooting. There's a bit of discussion swirling around this one. Ken Klippenstein, and he's done a piece here. I gotta say, I don't know what it is. Between Midas Touch and like Ken Klippenstein, do you guys just generally have that weird feeling? Maybe you have more substance to the feeling. I don't know if I could, if I have the evidence lined up to pin it down. But aren't these guys? These always seem to me to be a little bit sensationalist, and I'm hesitant to use their materials for almost anything. And maybe I'm overreacting to that. I don't know, but maybe not. They're very popular, no doubt, but it does seem like, I don't know, sensationalist stuff. Although this one appears to be, I don't know. I'm not certain. I haven't read the article, but it may be of some use. The ICE shooter's motive is of interest to everybody. It's the title of this piece here. But I did see this piece passed around yesterday, along with the note that, well, Klippenstein has at least, I guess, was one of the first to come to publication, having interviewed the shooter's friends and acquaintances. What's up with this guy? What might his ideology be, if he's got any? And so at the very least, it's, we're not sure whether you can believe these guys, but this is the first attempt at putting that together, and I suppose credit due for that. But then I've seen differing interpretations of what was reported, which also shouldn't surprise anybody. This is meant to be somewhat confusing. And people that I think are making excellent points about the article and about each other's observations on the articles, but they think they're in conflict, and I'm not certain that they are. But anyway, here's Ken Klippenstein's takeaways from interviewing the people around this particular shooter, and I guess we're going to end up having to name them at some point just to read along here. It says I guess I should open this in browser form because it's a little difficult to tell what's going on in Instapaper form. Exclusive, I guess it is. The ICE shooter's politics is now the headline on this piece. Joshua Jan, it's Jahn, is the shooter's last name, and are we still on alleged shooter if you've shot yourself? I don't know. His friends speak. At least they spoke to Ken Klippenstein, and some of the people said they were his friends. We don't know anything about it. The deadly sniper attack on a Dallas ICE facility yesterday morning. It was written yesterday, though, so this morning is what it says. Seemed straightforward. Did it really? I mean, it never did to me. With anti-ice engraved, not engraved, but written on unspent shell casings recovered from the scene per the FBI, whom I do not believe, generally speaking. But after interviewing several of the alleged shooter's former friends, the picture isn't so clear. That sounds like it could be true. Within minutes of the shooting, FBI Director Kash Patel, again, within minutes, not great for investigative purposes, he had posted on X, quote, while the investigation is ongoing, an initial review of the evidence shows an ideological, and he misspelled it, motive, ideological is what he wrote, motive behind this attack. See photo below. There's the one. One out of 5 rounds here has got something written on it, and what's written on it? The fabulously descriptive anti-ice. So, let's see. President Trump responded to the shooting by blaming the radical left and vowing to sign another executive order to dismantle what he called domestic terrorism networks, and he doesn't mean his own. This comes at the heels of another executive order he signed this week designating Antifa a, quote, domestic terrorist organization as he says, as I previously reported. Like, everybody sort of previously reported that. He signed it and he held it up in the Oval Office and showed it to everybody. It wasn't, shoe leather work by Ken Klippenstein. But this is where my suspicion comes through. I don't need to tell you that. Then, of course, a embedding of Donald Trump's very own Truth Social post about it, which is always a suspect thing to do. Vice President J.D. Vance, meanwhile, says, quote, we know that this person was politically motivated, pointing both to the inscriptions and, quote, some evidence we have that's not yet public. Stuff. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue. We're going to give a read-through to Ken Klippenstein's interview with the friends and acquaintances of the shooter at the ICE facility yesterday to try and figure out if there's anything to be figured out, what this was all about. And again, this whole thing, it seems to me, may very well be the kind of act that, just another in the chain of events of ironic value to weirdos on the internet. And we're all weirdos on the internet at some level. But that doesn't really have any ideological bent in the sense that we're used to hearing, left or right, Democrat or Republican or whatever typical label there may be. It's just a matter of essentially dark entertainment to people who enjoy this sort of thing for some strange reason. And I guess maybe, I don't know, maybe psychiatrists would say they're so withdrawn and apart, hold themselves so far apart from our typical view of society at large, and they feel in some ways, I guess, powerless from it. And this is like their way of, well, they'll lash out because that's the only impact that they can see themselves having on society and the real world. And somehow that's thrilling to them. I mean, you could just turn off the computer and go back out there, but they're uncomfortable with that. They're socially disengaged and anxious, and have found greater acceptance online. And, why not? You can find a lot more people, like-minded people, a lot more quickly without going anywhere or doing anything than you can actually going out there in the world. So results-wise, I guess it makes, I guess, what you would call economic sense to stay in and do your exploring that way. But it's within your control. You actually can have an impact on the world, but you can have a bigger impact on the world by becoming the world's leading star by doing something splashy and fantastic. But if you're dead, if you kill yourself afterwards, well, but that's the nihilism creeping in, I suppose. And there's just no explaining it because it's kind of psychotic. So anyway, back to this interviews, the results of the interviews that Ken had conducted here. First, there was the comment from J.D. Vance basically saying, well, I don't know what to tell you, but it's definitely left wing because reasons. The end. Now, on the off chance, he says, that the shooting wasn't what it looked like, I don't know that it's an off chance, but okay, I reached out to people who knew the gunman, and another, loaded phrase, we don't really need to use it, but for lack of a better terminology, I guess, the shooter was 29-year-old Joshua Jan, J-A-H-N, not sure how it's pronounced, not sure that it matters that much. You know who I'm talking about. 29, a little older than the usual suspects of the last couple of shootings, I guess. 3 who knew him since at least middle school agreed to speak to me on condition that I not name them, corroborating their friendship with photos and other records. Their accounts paint the picture of someone with a vaguely libertarian bent who despised both major parties and politicians generally, including Trump, but who didn't engage with politics beyond that. And yeah, that very often, I don't know, sometimes I see people who are gathering the facts and making conclusions off of that, and they say, well, that means he's apolitical and his motivation was not political. But sometimes the politics is the politics of the rejection of all otherwise organized politics, under the guise of either being too cool for politics or too jaded for politics or God only knows what. But it's a politics nonetheless, especially if you then decide you're going to reach out and impact the real world by killing people. That's a politics. And I know you're trying to say I'm doing this in the name of anti-politics, but, well, I think you understand the inherent contradiction there. Well, their accounts, these friends' accounts, also tell us what? He preferred edgy humor, again, very typical, and a bit of a euphemism for what's really going on there. Video games and the message board 4chan, oh no, not again, all of which he became increasingly steeped in as he withdrew from social life as well as their own friendships several years ago, they said. So some of these friends aren't really all that close necessarily either. None of his former friends believed that the, quote, anti-ICE inscription, such as it is, could possibly be sincere, feeling that such a serious political statement was anathema to who he was. His humor was deeply ironic, often offensive, and aggressive to the point of alienation. So, I mean, I think they're a good point probably being made. We don't know what the hell this means. He writes anti-ICE on there. That could mean, one, I'm anti-ICE, and I agree. It's hard to not entertain that as a conclusion, right? What if he means what he says? We're constantly being told, someone tells you who they are, believe them. So what? On the other hand, as they say, he's got a sick sense of humor that's deeply steeped in irony, and so you might do something like, well, I'm going to do this, and if I write anti-ICE, all the idiots will think I'm anti-ICE, but I'm really not, or I really don't care, or I never wrote this on there in the first place. That's also a possibility. to the extent it's got anything to do with his online persona and the way his friends and former friends describe him, it's much more likely that it doesn't mean that thing which people who don't want to think particularly deeply about anything will think it means if I just write it on there. That seems more likely than not. All right. He was most certainly an edgelord, an irony guy, one friend said. Edgelord, they helpfully explained for us parenthetically, is online speak for someone who likes to espouse edgy, nihilistic views. Asked about the inscription on the bullet, the friend says, Josh was an edgelord who wanted someone to get blamed. I think he tried his best to write something goofy to rile people up. That's not even particularly goofy, but okay. But only one goofy thing. He's had 5 rounds to write on. He only could think of one goofy thing, as it turns out. Allegedly. Another friend showed me a Facebook post describing how John, I wish I had something to go with here, had flooded his friends' comment sections with rape jokes. This then says, quote, playful shock humor, the friend said. And among guys who are fairly sure that there are no women in their in-group, that's how they view it. And, I would never, some of them would say it to, but I would never say it to a woman, but the tip-off is if they say, I would never say it to a female. If you say, I would never say it to a female, I think you would. I would never say it to a woman, I think you might not, but it's awfully hypocritical of you to be doing it in private anyway. Never mind. This kid's profile kid, now he's 29. We can't even get away with that anymore. I just don't want to say his name, or don't want to pronounce his name or mispronounce his name. Either way. But okay, Jan's profile on the gaming platform Steam showed the vast amounts of time he spent playing video games, particularly shooters, more than 6,000 hours on Rust, 3,000 on Team Fortress 2, and 1,000 on Left 4 Dead 2. Everything's a 2. Does anybody play the 1 anymore? He even found time to play 3.5 hours in the past 2 weeks, the account shows, because I guess he just wasn't very busy. How much planning does it take to go to an ice facility and just start shooting at people? I don't know why that's a surprise. Among the dozen or so usernames he used was one reading #impeachment. When I asked if this wasn't a clear reference to anti-Trump politics, his friends recoiled at the idea that he would express opposition to Trump so sincerely and straightforwardly. Instead, they saw it as a part of his broader ironic persona, poking fun at anti-Trump resistance types. Certainly could be. And of course, we've impeached presidents of both parties. But again, their point is, he just put that hashtag on there because that's one of those dumb political things that real people believe in, and I don't. I don't know. That's what they're saying. That said, one friend recalled that when Trump first came to power, John was not a fan, though he had contempt for mainstream politicians in general. His friends say that he had more of a libertarian bent, with one recalling an interest in the libertarian figure Ron Paul, which, by the way, is a right-wing figure, and come on, admit it already. Still, the friend who recounted his dislike, this dude's dislike of Trump, insisted that there was at least a kernel of seriousness to the username. If it was ironic, it's that half-irony, where you're half kidding, half serious, just in case, he said. He was never really into politics, especially not politicians, said another friend who had known Jan since age 8. He was into politics only in the 4chan sense. Contrarian, provocative, boundary pushing for laughs, not conviction. But it's a politics. Don't deny it. 4chan, the anonymous message board where provocation and irony are the coin of the realm, was apparently one of Jan's favorite haunts. His abrasive humor is where his friends' opinions on him diverge the most, with some describing it as amusing, but others as grating, especially as his online persona bled into real life. I mostly stopped talking to him when he took his 4chan/irony stuff into daily interactions, one friend told me. He was becoming unbearable. Once he dropped out of college, he had no obligation to be social, and none of us reached out due to his edgelord behavior. I wasn't able to find anyone with insight into John's more recent views, something that his friends said was unsurprising given his withdrawal from social life over the past few years. If you're having trouble finding people besides immediate family who knew him, that's part of the story. One friend said, every mutual friend drifted away over that kind of edgelord behavior. A fledgling version of John's humor appears in the following YouTube video. I'm not going to play it or anything, but it's since been removed anyway. From when he was a high schooler, a tongue-in-cheek parody of tech advice videos. I guess there's a little blurb here as a caption, which I guess might be partial transcript. Hello there, Facebook user. Are you tired of scrolling through your Facebook feed mindlessly? Well, there's a solution. You can unlike all your crappy pages. Ha ha ha. No, it's high school humor. The following audio recording of John bombing at stand-up comedy was shared with me. It drew a comparison by one friend to the 2019 Joker film starring Joaquin Phoenix as an off-putting loner who also tried and failed at comedy. The film culminates in a scene in which the Joker gets his revenge on the entertainment world by gunning down the host of a popular late-night TV show, if that's a thing that's in the news right now. The audio from his attempted stand-up routine where he bombs now resonates uncannily with Joker, the friend said. Ironically, John's contempt for Trump and the major political parties has bestowed them with one of the most intensely partisan news cycles in recent memory. In this sense, the joke is on him and on all of us too. So I don't know. I'm not certain what to make of this thing. I've seen varying interpretations of this thing. It's been kind of odd and disturbing to watch. People disagree about what the thing may mean, and I think they might be talking past each other in some sense. But for instance, let's see if I can't. Did I see these things and retweet them or put them in Instapaper? I'm not sure which one it was, but I thought somebody was making a reasonably good point about this article, but then I've seen some other people disagree with this take rather vehemently as well. For instance, I'm talking about the take by one Dr. Cara Berg Powers, not someone I follow or who I have run into before, but I thought this was actually a good point. So she's commenting on someone else's discussion about the Klippenstein article, Wajahat Ali, who I don't think I also am all that familiar with, but pointing out that Klippenstein here is with the receipts actually talking to the shooter's friends, except they all said we don't really know him all that well anymore. Surprise, not the left or even MAGA. Another white kid who spent countless hours online and was an edgelord who wanted someone to get blamed to rile people up. Certainly that's what Klippenstein said. I don't know how meaningful it is, but whatever. But Dr. Powers here saying, I actually think it's off base for the descriptor of these angry young white men who think violence is cool and or funny to be, quote, non-political. And I agree in a way. I mean, I think they think that's what they're doing, and I think you should maybe credit them in the first instance with what they think they're doing. But it isn't entirely obvious to me that this is non-political if the way they manifest their disenchantment with society in general is inherently political. Violent murder in ways that are meant to unbalance the world which we govern politically. There's just no way to be non-political. Every action is political at some level, and I suppose they might even appreciate the irony of that if they lived to think about it. But she goes on to say they're making rape jokes and saying racist things and wanting to sow chaos. Then this is the part I think that people are taking an objection to. That's literally the Alex Jones, Steve Bannon playbook. And I think it is, but I think it's also being interpreted differently. I have seen somebody, and I'll see if I can find it by looking through the early quoted responses to it. But basically somebody saying, no, you're misinterpreting the whole thing. These kids aren't Steve Bannon or Alex Jones. They don't have any long-term political goal in doing these things. It's just straight up nihilism. And I think that's true, too. I mean, it's clearly true. They're not Steve Bannon. They're not Alex Jones. They're different individuals. And these individual actors probably don't have any long-term political goals in mind. Here it is, Robert Evans saying, these kids aren't Alex Jones or Steve Bannon. The dude who fired in an ICE van and shot himself was not engaged in a cunning long-term political gambit. The term non-political here means that their motivation was not in furtherance of some sort of cohesive partisan project. They did it for the lulz. And that is also true, but it doesn't mean that it's non-political. It just means that, I mean, for instance, if such a thing can be said to exist, the politics of anarchy, right? I'm an anarchist. That means I want there to be, whatever. It's the loosest possible definition. I want any government. Well, it's still a system of governance. In a sense, it's just that everybody is responsible for themselves and will probably kill you. And they're not even responsible for themselves per se. But okay. But it strikes me that there are good points to both of it. I think it's true that it's off base to simply say, well, if they are no fan of either party, then they're non-political, especially if they're also saying, well, I'm libertarian. Well, that's political. But I don't really mean it. That's ironic. Okay, well, fine. But what you're doing has a political impact, whether you want it to be political or not. And I also think that if you express it a little bit differently, if you said they're making rape jokes and saying racist things and wanting to sow chaos, and that's literally what the Alex Joneses and Steve Bannons of the world have in their playbooks for individual actors that they can trigger and motivate to do, but that doesn't make them singular with Alex Jones and Steve Bannon, then I think you have a better point there. And maybe Robert Evans would even agree. It's not that these shooters necessarily have long-term political goals, especially if they're planning on killing themselves immediately afterwards. But that doesn't mean that what they're doing isn't in the Alex Jones or Steve Bannon playbook. I think there's a pretty well-established history of Steve Bannon outright saying, I'm looking to dip into this world and move these kids because I think they're movable. I think they're usable, not necessarily as actors in my long-term political plans because they're going to kill themselves afterwards. But I want to sow the chaos and have the opponents of my plan to whatever it is, dismantle the administrative state, live in fear so that they stand by while we do it. That's part, I think, of the Alex Jones, Steve Bannon playbook. It doesn't mean that they want to podcast forever once they're done shooting into ICE facilities. That's not part of their plans, but it is part of Steve Bannon and Alex Jones's plans, I think. And I think it's fair to say. And I just wanted to comment on it a little bit as we swirl in the confusion of yesterday's events. I don't know. I guess I don't have to warn you to stay open-minded to all of this in terms of interpreting what this thing means. But I do think it's a mistake to say, oh, yeah, he said it was non-political, so we're just going to say it's non-political. It's almost certainly a mistake to say the bullet says anti-ICE, and so he's anti-ICE. I just warn you, once again, that the people who said, for instance, that last week, because one of those bullet casings said, hey, fascist, catch, that must mean he's anti-fascist, which means he's coming from the left, the shooter in the other incident, in the Charlie Kirk killing. And you got to take it at face value. I mean, do you? One, you don't. But two, the people who are saying you got to take it at face value are, in many cases, as it turns out, some of the same people who looked at you a few years ago right in the eye and said, I know it says polenta, but what he really meant was child sexual abuse. What? Now, he said what he said. Hey, fascist, catch. You got to take it as it comes. You look at the actual text of the words. All right, well then why wasn't that about polenta? Well, that was different, Okay, sure. Whatever, man. But then again, I guess we remind ourselves these are the same people that are just redefining right-wing terrorism as official government policy now, and so therefore not illegal, and so therefore definitely not terrorism. And that's why left-wing terrorism is on the rise, because we've defined right-wing terrorism off the books now. So relative to the disappearing definition of right-wing terrorism, this other one is definitely on the rise, even if that other one isn't a thing. Okay. Got to get to some other news of other kinds. So I think, well, I'm sure we'll end up referring back to things. Some clean break from this. Next item I really kind of have to bring to your attention because we're, I think 6 days now from the next government shutdown. What's it going to be like? Do we have a playbook for this thing? What is government shutdown in the era of dodgy? But what is dodgy still a thing because Elon Musk is gone? And the answer is yes. They're just going to run the same playbook over again. The new twist, I guess, on government shutdown is only shocking and new if you realize, if you set aside the dodgy nihilism that took place in the context not of government shutdown, but of a supposedly functioning government. What do we mean here? The news from NBC, I don't know, I just at random grabbed them, and something from Politico as well. White House lays groundwork for mass government firings if there's a shutdown. Usual procedure here. Yes, there's a government shutdown. Yes, everybody working for the government is worried and nervous because they're not getting paid or they're furloughed at the time. Usually, I think they've grown accustomed to responsible governments once they reopen, going back and giving everybody their back pay and making them whole for the times that they either worked without pay or were furloughed without pay. So the new twist here is we're not going to do that. And in fact, we're not even going to let you come back to your jobs. Instead of furloughing you, we're going to fire you to clean out more of the federal government and get rid of more federal employees, which I guess is supposed to have been, in the first instance, taken as a threat by everybody who, the adults in the room. Oh, my God, we got to do anything we can to block, to make sure that the government doesn't shut down because they're just going to do another whole round of firings. And that'll be terrible, and we definitely don't want that, so we'll do anything to keep the government open and operating. But interestingly, they've shot themselves in the foot because the reactions I've seen is they already did this, and they shut down the government, or they fired everybody when the government was open. Now the threat is, well, we're also going to fire everybody when the government is closed. So what's the difference? Oh, I got to do anything I can to keep the government open. Why? I'll capitulate to their demands in order to keep the government open. They can fire all these people with the government open just as easily as they do with the government closed. I mean, it's all illegal, but so far that hasn't made a great deal of difference. I mean, yes, they're winning their cases in court, but they're winning their cases in court 6 months after the people who brought these cases have moved on to other employment and have no intention of going back. Meanwhile, by the way, at the same time, word going out to people fired during the first round of this nonsense when Dodgy was doing it, once again, offering people their jobs back. We actually need people here to carry out policy after all. Will you please come back? It's unclear how many of them are available to come back or willing to come back. Meanwhile, as I said, the White House lays groundwork for mass government firings if there's a shutdown. The Office of Management and Budget says in a memo that agencies should prepare reduction in force plans, RIF, reduction in force plans, to accompany furloughs if a spending bill isn't passed next week. And that's all they've got is Monday and Tuesday before we hit the shutdown wall. Monica Alba and Zoe Richards reported it this way. The White House is raising the stakes, maybe, of a potential government shutdown by drafting a request for federal agencies to produce or prepare reduction in force plans in case Congress doesn't pass a spending bill before October 1st. In a memo from the Office of Management and Budget obtained by NBC News, probably by them sending it to you, the Trump administration indicated it's prepared to go beyond the traditional furloughing of some government employees during shutdowns and fire federal employees. With respect to those federal programs whose funding would lapse and which are otherwise unfunded, such programs are no longer statutorily required to be carried out, the memo says. RIF notices will be in addition to any furlough notices provided due to the lapse in appropriation. The memo, first reported by Politico, and I've got that report, filed away, points to job losses for certain federal employees if the government shuts down next week. Programs that did not benefit from an infusion of mandatory appropriations will bear the brunt of a shutdown, and we must continue our planning efforts in the event Democrats decide to shut down the government, the memo says. That's the usual attempt to shift blame to the minority party for not providing enough votes for them to be able to, win with a majority vote, oddly enough. And I guess here they'd be trying to blame that on Democratic senators, perhaps failing to provide votes for cloture to bring an appropriations bill to the floor. But, of course, we just saw the Republicans use the nuclear option as necessary, and Trump will no doubt encourage them to use the nuclear option here for this, and then they won't, and then they'll say, see, that's the Democrats' fault. The memo says agencies would be directed to consider reductions in force notices for all employees in programs, projects, or activities whose discretionary funding will lapse on October 1st, that lack available alternative funding sources and are, quote, not consistent with the president's priorities. We read a little bit about what that means yesterday in Jamel Bouie's piece, which we almost finished, and see whether we can sneak in the ending of that at some point. Democrats and Republicans are locked in a standoff as government funding is on the brink of expiring. That's usually the case. At the end of the day on Tuesday, the Republican-controlled House passed a short-term bill to fund the government through November 21st, but the Senate, which requires 60 votes to approve a measure, no, it doesn't, rejected both the GOP and Democratic proposals to keep the government open, so therefore they're obviously fair, you see. The OMB memo puts significant pressure on Democrats in which they risk federal employees getting fired if they don't vote with Republicans to keep the government open. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, of course, of New York, got to get our music queued up here, and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, by the way, also of New York, fired back at OMB Director Russell Vought on Wednesday night. This is an attempted intimidation. Donald Trump has been firing federal workers since day one, not to govern, but to scare, Schumer said in a statement. You're right. This is nothing new and has nothing to do with funding the government. These unnecessary firings will either be overturned in court or the administration will end up hiring the workers back, just as they did as recently as today. Hey, that's true too. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think we got the gist of this from the NBC News report. We probably don't even need the Politico report per se, but they gave them credit for doing the work first. One of the rare times when outlets will do that. They won't do it if you're a blogger and you develop the news first, but they will do it if you are a supposedly respected news site. Anyway, we got the gist of it. There's some back and forth here between the other leaders, between Jeffries and, well, no back and forth. Jeffries criticizes Russ Vought in, strident terms. Listen, Russ, you are a malignant political hack. That's true. We will not be intimidated by your threat to engage in mass firings. Get lost. Okay, well, that's a little more blunt. I think Schumer provided a little more explanation as to why they don't feel all that threatened by it. And we knew it before we began. They can fire all of these, or they can attempt to fire all these people and get it so that they're effectively, in fact, fired, even if they have rights that can be vindicated in court later on. With or without a government shutdown, and it's true, Schumer, I guess, really hits the nail on the head there. This doesn't have much to do with the shutdown. They fired these guys when the government was fully open. They'll fire them. It'll make it easier to fire them when they're closed, I guess. Vought has a point there, and they may be able to accomplish it in a way that's not as easy to overturn in courts, or that lower courts believe are easy to reverse, but the Supreme Court comes up with some explanation. Well, the government was closed and there was no funding for these functions, and these functions aren't legally required to be carried out unless they are authorized and appropriated for, and here in this case they were not. So they may very well point to this as a way of diminishing worker protections for those who are riffed. Nonetheless, Schumer also makes the good point that the government sometimes pretends anyway to come crawling back and looking for those people to be hired back to help them carry out their evil policies later on. Anyway, we got to have that on record because that's going to happen fairly shortly, and we'll bubble up a little bit more over the weekend. Let's see. There is a little international news. Oh, we really should go back and talk about how ridiculous. We made mention of the fact that the world was embarrassed for us the other day when Trump addressed the United Nations. We didn't really get into the specifics of what it was that he said that was so dumb, and we didn't get around to reading the very weird post that he provided on Truth Social that essentially made a flip-flop on Ukraine and Russia. And I don't know, did I provide that yesterday in the links or whatever? But basically, he appears to have, for the moment, decided, all right, well, maybe Ukraine actually could and should win this war. And in an effort to, I guess, normalize it and sane wash it in some way, the news folks were a bit at a loss for what could this possibly mean. And they said, well, this must reflect his growing frustrations with Putin, which it might. I mean, that's not a terrible way of putting it. But what we've been watching in the background all along is Trump saying, I can convince Putin to do anything. Putin and I have a great relationship. If I say this war should stop, it'll stop. In 24 hours, we could get this done. And then he finds out, no, not only not 24 hours, but maybe not at all. And in fact, maybe the war escalates. As I'm saying, I'm going to tamp it down. And just as he's in the middle of telling UN folks, I'm really good at this stuff. You should listen to me. I can settle all the wars, even the wars that don't actually exist. So I can definitely settle this one. And the one where he's finding out I can't settle this one, he's switching sides. He's been so stridently anti-Ukraine the whole time. And now, maybe they should win. Maybe they can conquer back all their territory. Maybe we can help them do it. That's a major reversal, but he's just trying to pretend that it's, not one, which is a little weird. All right. I'm going to have to scroll around and see if I can't find, I'm pretty sure I had put something aside about that, but I don't know. Somehow, I don't know. Sometimes these things don't land the way they're supposed to in Instagram or Instapaper and the other Insta stupid thing that I'm working on here. But I assure you that it did happen. And, let me see if I can't find it, by searching just quickly and see whether it comes up here. Let's say the first hit's from Axios and Fox News, neither of which I would like to do. But maybe we'll go over here to NPR. I don't love that one either. But I also see that Reason magazine is covering something, interestingly enough. Trump, in major shift, suggests Ukraine can win back territory long held by Russia. That's the headline from over at NPR. Franco Ordonez is who we're reading. President Trump on Tuesday shifted his position on whether Ukraine should hold out for all the territory seized by Russia, saying on social media that he thinks Ukraine is in a position to win it all back. Remember, of course, the position up to now has been not only can they not win it back, but they shouldn't. They should cede that territory in exchange for quote-unquote peace. Nobody believed that was really in the cards either, but that was Trump's position. It's a reversal. Like a 180-degree reversal, I would say, from his long-held position that Kyiv would need to give up some of its territory to Moscow to end the war, such as Crimea, which Russia annexed in 2014, and more than that, actual territory in the eastern provinces of the rest of Ukraine, the remainder, besides Crimea. But I don't know, here not mentioned for a specific call out. But now, after getting to know and fully understand the Ukraine/Russia military and economic situation, Trump said he believes Ukraine, backed by the European Union and NATO, can win back all its territory. And I guess we were so excited by this alleged good news, which I don't know whether it's going to stick or not. Tomorrow he may forget it. Today is tomorrow, by the way. So, maybe he's already forgotten it. But that's no excuse for not pointing out quote, after getting to know and fully understand the Ukraine/Russia military and economic situation, we just said seconds ago in this article that Crimea was annexed by Russia in 2014. It is 11 years into this war. The actual president of the United States of America, honest to God, the Constitution says that he's definitely our president and everything, and he's all in charge and all this stuff. And he had a first time around. This is his second term. And there was somebody else president in between those two terms. Like, he's been the responsible figure in charge of this, allegedly in charge of foreign policy for 5 out of the past 11 years. Not the majority of it, I guess, but, it's worth pointing out it's nearly half of it. And he's now gotten to know and fully understand the Ukraine-Russia military and economic situation. Well, thank you. Thank you for playing. Thank you for joining us. Welcome. Not really. Get the F out. You're an idiot. But, I mean, what a thing to say and not comment upon in the article. Really? I mean, minus the first term. Forget it. Throw it out the window. It's fine. He wasn't paying attention for a year into your term. Oh, now I understand it. Oh, wow. Does he understand it? This must be why I got impeached the first time. That's crazy. What was I looking at? Oh my God. I thought I was right. Turns out I was wrong. I should have been impeached. Wow, that is weird. Wow, holy cow. I mean, as long as we're doing 180-degree reversals, why not? And speaking of why not, that's the next quote. Why not? He said in a post after he met Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, even suggesting that Ukraine could, quote, maybe even go further than that. So more than 180 degrees of reversal. I guess in order for it to still be a reversal, it has to be a 360 degrees brings it back. 540 degrees reversal, I guess. Was it that I was able to do that math so quickly in my head? No, I quickly recalled my kids' Taekwondo training, and that, yes, a 540 is what they call the turn and a half kick. But okay, there you go. So the math was already done for me by our Korean allies, who may be on the way out at this point. Anyway, so how about that? Not only can Ukraine win all its territory back, but maybe they can even invade Russia and take territory, like Nobel Peace Prize guy over here has got. Maybe there should be a full-on invasion of Russia as well. Okay, never mind all of that. Moving on. The reversal is the latest example of how Trump has swung between deference, frustration, and indirect threats against Russia. Early in his second term, Trump boasted that his close relationship with the Russian President Vladimir Putin would help him broker a quick resolution to the conflict. Of course, this is something he boasted of during his first term as well. And in between, although I guess I would note if a closer reading of what he was saying prior to his first election was, I don't know Vladimir Putin, I don't know him, because he was busy trying to say, I'm not involved with Russia, there's no collusion going on. But I feel like we would have a great relationship. But that actually, I think, followed. We do have a great relationship. I think he started with that one. He totally respects me, and he doesn't respect Obama. He's never going to respect Obama or Hillary. Lock her up. But I might be too close to him, and that might be trouble. I don't know him. Coffee boy, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, but as the war dragged on, Trump has grown increasingly frustrated with Putin. In July, during a meeting with the NATO Secretary General, Trump lashed out at Putin and announced that he was sending Patriot air defense missiles to Ukraine. As recently as last month, when Trump met Putin in Alaska when they met in Alaska to try to broker an end to the war, Trump had said he believed, quote, some land swapping would take place. Zelensky had been resistant to that idea. There's more to the article, but time out just to say, I think we read into the record on the pre-recorded Tuesday program that Estonia now joins the ranks of countries nearby to Russia, which have experienced incursions into their airspace. Now, I will also throw in there was a moment in the last couple of days during which Trump also recorded saying something tremendously stupid. That, well, the thing about Russia and the wars with Russia, we don't have a war with them. We're protected. We've got a huge ocean and lots of distance between us. And so fortunately, we don't have to get into this whole European war thing. That didn't stop him from believing that there was a war between Armenia and Cambodia, of course. But, never mind all of that for some reason. But that was just a mistake. Of course, there's a vast ocean between us, because where is there not a vast ocean between us? Where you met in Alaska. And so the timeout, though, was really to say, latest country to experience air incursions by Russian forces, the United Freaking States of America. Now, it used to be, and to the republic for which it stands, by the way, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. U.S. fighter jets scrambled to intercept Russian warplanes near Alaska. This used to happen all the time. You might even remember, what's her name? Sarah, why can't I remember? I was thinking of Sarah Ferguson yesterday. So now her name, and then I'm like, Sarah Putin. No, the other one. Palin. Yes, you may remember, she, of course, thought she had strong foreign policy and military credentials because up in Alaska, who has to deal with it when Putin rears his head? But it was a regular occurrence. It's true. I don't know how much foreign policy credit I'd give her for turning back the incursions. They're designed to be turned back, but there you have it. But now they're doing it again. Maybe they took a break for a while and they're back to it. They probably didn't even take a break to it. U.S. fighter jets scrambled to intercept Russian warplanes near Alaska, reported by CBS News. Tucker Reels gives us the news, just in case you wanted to know quickly what was it. NORAD said 2 Russian Tu-95 long-range strategic bombers, that's what we were always afraid of, and 2 Su-35 fighter jets were flying in the Alaskan Air Defense Identification Zone, which is international airspace, but abuts the U.S. and Canadian sovereign airspace. NORAD responded Wednesday by sending an E-3 early warning and control aircraft, along with 4 F-16s and 4 KC-135 tanker planes to positively intercept the Russian aircraft in the Alaskan ADIZ. So, in that sense, no different from what always used to happen, but, it's happening at the same time that we are also seeing it happen in Estonia, Romania, Poland, and they're in a hot shooting war with Ukraine. So, just wanted to add that to the mix. All right, where were we with the NPR story about the shift on Russia and Ukraine? Since the Alaska talks, there have been no signs that Putin is willing to meet Zelensky. Russia has ramped up its strikes on Ukraine, and there have been a series of incursions by Russian military aircraft into NATO airspace in the month since the talks. Now here, too. But we're NATO. We count. Well, ostensibly, we're still in NATO. Trump says he thinks NATO members should shoot down Russian aircraft in such cases. Yes, I do, he said in answer to a question from a reporter. Anyone going to ask him about the Alaska thing? No, I don't. I hope that's the answer. He may still say, yes, I do. Not sure. But it's international airspace. That doesn't seem to matter when it's a boat and it's Venezuela. But then again, Venezuela has no nuclear weapons. So, message to the world, Venezuela should get nuclear weapons. Just please don't. I don't know if you can afford it anyway. Asked whether he would back up NATO allies if that happened, Trump said, depends on the circumstance. But, we're very strong toward NATO that we're trying to leave and undermine at every turn. But now we've changed our minds, so maybe we're into NATO again. In his social media post, Trump said that Russia looks like, quote, a paper tiger because the war has dragged on for so long, and said that the United States would continue to supply weapons to NATO. Good luck to all. Hope you have a good time. Good luck to all? Okay. Trump said, no, how about not good luck to the guys that we're against? Trump has so far resisted calls for tougher sanctions, insisting that European leaders first need to stop buying oil from Russia, as well as apply steep tariffs, for major buyers of Russian oil like China. By the way, not mentioned in here, but also was in the social media post, when he says they would continue to supply weapons to NATO, he put it in a very interesting form, which was, I think, we're going to give the weapons to NATO and they can do whatever they want with them, which is very un-Trumpian in the approach to NATO. This is a 180-degree reversal on a lot of things, which is kind of amazing. And of course, we're going to supply the weapons and we're going to give them to them, and it's going to be for Ukrainian defense. And again, he got impeached doing the opposite. It's really quite amazing, and I don't think we're amazed enough at what's going on here. Although, I mean, maybe this is how you report it if you're like, I just do not believe that this is a statement of the current state of affairs in American foreign policy. I believe that he may reverse himself yet again tomorrow. Or I don't even know if he wrote this thing. In a pointed speech, though, to world leaders at the United Nations General Assembly on Tuesday, Trump said a lot of things. Boy, oh boy, we'll get to that afterwards. Trump said it was inexcusable that some NATO members were still buying Russian energy. Think of it. They're funding the war against themselves. Who the hell ever heard of that one? There's a kernel of a good point in there. Zelensky said he was hoping to see more sanctions on Russia, and he supported Trump's push to get NATO members to stop buying Russian energy. Zelensky said he had spoken with Slovakia's prime minister, who seemed open to cutting off its imports. I'm not sure the Hungarians are ready, Zelensky said. Trump said he hasn't spoken to Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban about it yet. I had a gut feeling if I did, he might stop, Trump said. Well, that's a pretty dumb gut feeling, but there's a lot of gut for you to be feeling in. So, there's room for a lot of positions in there, I guess. All right. I mentioned to you that the speech to the UN was particularly stupid, unsettling, embarrassing before the world, and it was. In this case, we'll let David Rothkopf, who usually does a great job with such things, treat you to a recap of what was going on. Trump's UN address was a tragedy of Shakespearian proportions. And by the way, before he even got into the hall, you should just be aware of the fact that Trump and Trump world are outraged and want firings, arrests, expulsions, a shooting war with the UN in some cases over what he calls the triple sabotage. I know they were doing it on purpose because how could it possibly be the case? The escalator doesn't work. The teleprompter doesn't work. And also his new thing, by the way, is, do you know that there was no applause for my tremendous speech inside of the room? And the reason is that my microphone was off. Now, you heard all of it because the microphone was on. But There is a way in which this could happen, that the microphone is on, and so the feed to the television studios has got the audio. But his claim is that inside the hall, my speech wasn't amplified in person. Now, of course, they've all got headphones on and are listening to simultaneous translations of it. Not all of them. Many of them speak perfect English and could be just listening in the hall. But there was no indication, like they weren't pointing around saying, hey, I can't hear anything. But Melania said she couldn't hear it. Trump says Melania says that she couldn't hear it. And so that's the reason they weren't standing and giving him applause and awarding him the Nobel Peace Prize. Triple sabotage. Anyway, if they couldn't hear it, thank God, because it was freaking stupid on so many levels. And now David Rothkopf will tell you why. Oh, I should expand on the thing, by the way. Not only does he believe that it was sabotage that the escalator stopped, but then he exaggerated. Oh, it stopped so suddenly. The first lady could have fallen down and her face would have hit the jagged edges of the escalator stairs and she could have been mauled and maimed, but she's in such good shape that it didn't happen. And the video shows it's sort of like, it comes to an abrupt stop, but no danger of anybody falling. But this obviously is a childhood fear of Donald Trump's, the sharp but doesn't prevent him from using escalators. Loves the escalators. But his supporters, I mentioned yesterday, Mike Cernovich said that they should have been shooting at, the Secret Service should have gunned down all the UN workers in the area because this was obviously an assassination attempt, which is amazing because, of course, this whole thing presumes, well, an assassin would be totally confounded by a person using and functioning escalator. There's no way to, predict the movements of a person standing still on an escalator and shoot him. I mean, holy mackerel. But they've been expanding on that. And the tactical bros were saying yesterday on Twitter, oh, well, once the escalator stopped and he was forced to walk up the escalator because it's actually stairs, he was trapped in the narrow confines of the escalator, what do they call it? The fatal funnel. And apparently, well, some of the Iraq vets on Blue Sky explained that the military and now police, because of more or less the same thing, consider, having to send their troops in through a doorway into an occupied building, occupied by terrorists, criminals, what have you, insurgents, the enemy, that going through that narrow space, well, that's dangerous. That's the fatal funnel. I understand the concept. It didn't take too long to understand. But the idea that a stairwell or an escalator is if it was really a fatal funnel problem, the Secret Service was at fault for saying, yes, let's use this thing. Why they don't use secure elevators instead, I don't know. But also someone else pointed out, by the way, this is the escalator in the lobby of the United Nations building during a General Assembly when there were dozens of world leaders there. Probably the most secure atmosphere on Earth, just not a place that you're going to worry so much about slowly moving up the stairs. There's no, snipers inside looking to take out the president. I mean, or if they were, they wouldn't get very far. That's certainly the case. But some of them don't care about getting very far. So, all right, whatever. They worried a little bit. He's turned it into a thing. And online, they're turning it into a tactical thing. They should be expelling diplomats. They should be firing the workers. Meanwhile, other early report I hear is that one source had a videographer with the Trump entourage had run up ahead to get video of Trump coming up the escalator from the top, and he was the one that accidentally booted the emergency stop button, and he caused the stop. But they should also execute everybody. So there you go. Trump wants arrests. Some of these guys want the diplomats expelled. Caroline Leavitt was looking for people to get fired, and Mike Cernovich and others think bullets should have been flying, which would be totally safe, by the way. Anyway, what about the UN address itself? A tragedy of Shakespearian proportions, says David Rothkopf. Subheader reads, of course, the president's main messages today, back in the day he gave the address, were ones of irrationality and instability. So who knows what the plot points or soliloquies will be tomorrow or next week, or indeed right now. He begins this way. Instead of a traditional public address from a world leader, U.S. President Donald Trump tilted back his badly dyed hair-sprayed coif and howled at the moon for the better part of an hour during his speech to the UN General Freaking Assembly on Tuesday morning. The whole world sat there to see this one. Well, not the better part, definitely not the better part of the hour. To describe the speech as insane while accurate would distract from just how extraordinarily packed with lies it was, how profoundly ignorant it was, how much damage it did to the United States' standing in the world. It clearly marked a low point in America's relationship with the United Nations and the international order we helped create in the wake of World War II. The New World Order. From a purely U.S. political perspective, I added the world order part. From a purely U.S. political perspective, emphasizing how haggard and low energy our rapidly declining president is key. He made a point to note that an apparent mechanical issue with the UN escalator was an insurmountable problem, for example. Most of the rest of us who are in fairly reasonable shape might have noted that a stalled escalator is actually just a stairway that we could have walked right up. But it would nonetheless be a mistake to ignore just how crazed the speech was. It was apparent from Trump's opening moments when he railed about the UN's broken teleprompter, to the point later when he brought it up again in his broader condemnation of the UN as also broken, highlighting what he saw as its uselessness in not coming to his assistance in solving the famous 7 global conflicts that we also know he did not solve. It was apparent in the fact that he argued that he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize, while noting he also takes great pride in discussing the attack he authorized on Iran and those he ordered against boats that he claims, without evidence, were trafficking in drugs on the high seas. Well, but wait, there's more. But wait, there's 2 minutes while we regroup and take a sip of water to get ready to spill out the horrors afterwards. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Let's get to the balance of the reporting on Trump's crazy-ass speech to the UN. We were reading David Rothkopf's recounting of things under the headline, Trump's UN address was a tragedy of Shakespearian proportions, and it's hard, even for Rothkopf, to get across just how insane the whole thing was. And as he says, to describe it as insane is not nearly enough, because you also have to talk about you would just be ignoring how packed with lies it was, how ignorant it was, how much damage it did to the United States standing in the world, etc., etc. So again, the speech contained the most extensive condemnation of green energy and what Trump considers the climate change hoax that we have ever heard from a public official since possibly the invention of the steam engine. And mind you, by the way, I understand that the theme of this year's General Assembly was, in fact, sustainable energy, global warming, climate change, etc. So he took time to say, I actually oppose everything that you're convening to discuss, but I'm doing it from an ignorant standpoint that is packed with lies and profoundly ignorant, etc., etc. For instance, science be damned, oligarchs love fossil fuels, or what Trump noted that he demands White House staffers refer to as beautiful, clean coal. Windmills, on the other hand, are the pinwheels of Satan. Someday we will get to the bottom of Trump's, what is this? Anemophobia. Anemometer, I guess, is the root of this thing. There's no meter involved, but all right. Windmill phobia, I suppose. Clearly, he had, that's as difficult to say as acetaminophen, as you may know. Clearly, he had a bad experience with something that blew him the wrong way as a child, or more recently. Generally speaking, it's held to be that he doesn't like seeing them offshore at his Scottish golf course. They ruin the beauty of the view. They exist. And so I wanted to see just ocean. But of course, then he'd see that. So it's so boring. It's just water over and over again anyway. But, he hates the look of them. And then has anything that anybody has anything to say about that's negative about them, he just absorbs and assumes is true. They drive the whales loco. They cause ear cancer. Any number of things that he's come up with. But okay. He defended his irrational lose-lose global trading system, destroying tariffs. His tariff. Okay. I guess, I'm sorry. The way this should read is he defended his irrational lose-lose global trading system destroying tariffs. That should have been like hyphenated. System-destroying tariffs. There we are. In which in and of itself will soon be listed in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders as an extreme symptom of economic psychosis. All right, too much, Dave. He downplayed civilian casualties in Ukraine, even after reversing himself, and explained this war wouldn't have happened if there had been a good leadership in the country in front of President Vladimir Zelensky, no less. And by the way, he was like leader of this country when a lot of that war happened. But, it took him some time to figure out. He continued to argue that he could have solved the conflict were it not that Vladimir Putin had inexplicably let him down. So now it's the Europeans who should take the lead in stopping the Russians, or else the U.S. would have to take strong action sometime in the near future, or maybe never, who knows. And again, now that he's announced that we will, maybe we won't. I don't know. Things could change. I could be impeached again for not doing it. It should be noted that underscoring the degree to which Trump was making up foreign policy on the fly, later on Tuesday, he posted on social media a statement seeming to reverse his prior positions for which he had been impeached, etc. I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form, it read. He also said NATO countries should shoot down Russian aircraft approaching their airspace, all of which sounds good. And if that's his new position, well done, except for the fact that, that would mean we have to shoot down Russian aircraft here in the United States. It's different for us. I don't know. But by the way, just to connect things back a little bit to something we discussed earlier, the reason, I think you all know inherently, the reason he was impeached the first time around for the Ukraine situation, and in addition to, all sorts of crazy manipulation and lies, but the reason it rose to an impeachable offense was that the Congress had spoken and it appropriated this money, and by law it was obligated to send them the aid and weapons that the Congress had designated for their use, and which was now law. I connect it this way. I don't like Ukraine, so I don't want to send it, so I'm not gonna, which is essentially the same situation we've been in over the past year with firings. I don't like those people, so I don't want them to be there, but they're statutorily obligated to allow them to do this work. I'm not going to spend that money, but you're statutorily obligated to spend it. I'm going to have a government shutdown. And so here, the one difference where the courts might, view things differently is during a shutdown, and when there's no appropriation made for discretionary spending, you're not at that point, in some cases, statutorily obligated to keep those people on or spend any money in furtherance of those goals. Usually we are, and it's usually a foregone conclusion. Everybody's working to reopen the government and start this back up again because we've statutorily obligated ourselves to do these things for the past 25 years, and we expect to do so for the next. But what if we just don't do it? It's an open question whether we're going to do it. Used to not be, but now it is. So I don't know. Things could come out very differently. But the point is that they may take advantage of the fact that there's no statutory obligation, at least temporarily, to do these things. But two, even when there is a statutory obligation, he tends to ignore them and has been impeached for it in the past. Okay. One of his most detailed perorations was devoted to the perils of immigration, which, this is the whole rest of the world here you're talking to. Trump told his audience that immigration was destroying their countries, not ours, but it is, but I'm taking care of it. But your countries, you're not taking care of it, and it's destroying them all. It's time to end the failed experiment of open borders. You have to end it now, he asserted. He exclaimed in an epic soundbite that will be replayed around the world tonight in its embodiment of the entire speech. Trump's narcissism, delusions of competence, and contempt for his audience, all of these things, the embodiment of this entire speech, that I'm really good at this stuff. Your countries are going to hell. Once again, I've mangled Dave's expression of this thing again, but he's got such an interesting and unique style that first read doesn't do it, right? Here we go. Once again, I'll give it to you. He exclaimed in an epic soundbite that will be replayed around the world tonight in its embodiment of the entire speech, Trump's narcissism, delusions of competence, and contempt for his audience, that I'm really good at this stuff. Your countries are going to hell. He's standing in front of the world's most accomplished diplomats, telling, I'm the one that's really good at this stuff. You don't understand. You've all been wrong about the world order of things. Name an area, and Trump lied about it. And that may be, issue areas or geographical areas, I would add. Name a global issue, and he laid out a U.S. position that was at odds with reason and most of the world, with the exception to his welcome, if totally out of character, call for an end to the development of biological weapons. He also appeared to call for ending work on new nuclear weapons, but that riff is almost certain to be walked back soon, given Trump's regular calls for modernizing our nuclear arsenal. He personally attacked the mayor of London, asserting erroneously that he wanted to impose, you ready for this one? Sharia law in the English capital. He attacked the Green movement in Europe, even as one of its leaders was presiding over the meeting. And, of course, he attacked Joe Biden. And why not? Did I mention the aside about how once upon a time, when Trump was, in his own words, a very successful real estate developer in New York, he offered to remodel the UN? He did not get the gig, and as a result, the UN now has terrazzo floors instead of the marble ones that he would have installed. Huge scandal. He said, I am a man more sinned against than sinning. Oh, I see. More sinned against than sinning. Oh, okay. Gotcha. Likening the UN to a great stage of fools. That'll win the audience over. He warned that people should fear his wrath, saying, and thou, all shaking thunders, smite flack the thick rotundity o' the world. Okay. There's your Shakespearianisms, I suppose. Oh, wait. That was King Lear. But face it, listening to Trump today, the one clear message was that Shakespeare got it exactly right when it comes to the lunacy of aging rulers. Of course, King Lear was fiction, but sadly, today's performance by Trump out on the heath of the international community was not. Instead, it was a low point for American diplomacy, at a moment at which the world realized, I think they knew already, the nation that had been a cornerstone of its stability for 80 years had slipped its moorings. You could see the shock of those in the great plenary hall as they took it in, and we all had to worry when we saw them from time to time nervously applaud Trump's remarks. Would any among them be strong enough to offset the reality of an America gone rogue, led by a man like Trump? As Shakespeare also wrote in Lear, "'Tis the time's plague when madmen lead the blind." All right, so it was a little difficult to read through that for the first time, I think, on the air, but you get the point. But basically, so many moments in that speech which were of such enormous embarrassment, it's really hard to catalog them, and maybe you just can't. I think somewhere in this compilation, I've got a 2-minute compilation from one of the new entrants in the news biz here. Although, again, I'm not seeing it as I'm scrolling through. I think there's a good number of things that I click, post it in Instapaper, and when you go, hey, it said it went through, it's just not here. Or, there's so many damn things here going on, and I'm posting so many of them to Instapaper. It's hard to tell whether they just don't go through or they go through, but they've been buried under the latest flood. But somebody did a 2-minute video of, I guess the lowlights, they called it, of the speech, and what can I tell you? Most of them, of course, have been repeated along the way. So I guess we'll just have to leave it at that. If I can dig up, was it Zetio? Is that the name of the new outlet that everybody's working for? I'll take a look and see if I can't find this Zetio video. What? No effing Zetio now? I guess AJ would ask about this. All right. It's an old reference now. The Simpsons. The Sopranos is old-timey TV. There's a whole generation like, I don't watch old stuff on television. That's practically black and white. All right. Where else were we, and what else might we be able to shoehorn in today that's different? And, here we will add to the airspace incursions the possibility that Denmark is now also among them, except there's questions remaining of exactly who's responsible for this. But apparently Danish airports have found their airspace dangerously jammed, such that they had to stop flights temporarily with drones in the airspace. Denmark says a professional actor now behind drone incursions over its airports. And we don't mean Wilford Brimley or the like. We, of course, mean somebody rather sophisticated is coordinating these. They weren't sure for the first couple of hours. Is this just a local prankster? Or is this a state operator? Is this a terroristic operator? What's going on? I have the BBC's report here. Alex Phillips and Adrian Murray are the reporters bylined on this one. Denmark says drones flown over its airports appear to be the work of a professional actor, but there was no evidence of Russian involvement so far after such activity disrupted its airspace for the second time in a week. No comment on the pronunciation of all of this. Aalborg Airport forced to shut down for several hours on Wednesday evening after green lights were spotted overhead, while Billund Airport was also briefly closed. 3 smaller airports also reported drone activity, so you got to suspect something here. On Monday, Copenhagen Airport temporarily closed due to a drone incursion. Defense Minister, Troels Lund Poulsen, anything close to reality? I don't know. Told a news conference that the hybrid attack was part of a systematic operation, but said the devices had been launched locally. A hybrid attack uses a mix of military and non-military tactics and is designed to interfere with the nation's infrastructure or institutions. Drones pose a risk of colliding with planes, particularly during takeoff or landing, but halting air traffic in and out of an airport to avoid this can cause delays and flights being redirected elsewhere. At least 3 flights were diverted away from Aalborg during the incident. All the airports affected by the overnight incident sit on Jutland, the part of Denmark that is on the European mainland. Drones were first sighted over the northerly Aalborg airport around, let's see. That would be, it's 21:44, giving us military local time. That's, 9:44 on the 12-hour clock. Okay. A few minutes later, police received reports of drone activity near small southerly airports in, why did I start down this road? Esbjerg, Sonderburg, and Skridstrup. Oh my gosh, Skridstrup. Maybe. Sorry, Denmark. Possible drone activity over Billund prompted the closure of its airport for about an hour early on Thursday morning. You get the idea? They're just not sure what's going on here. Nothing definitive that they can announce at this point connecting it to Russia. But, as they note down a little further, Estonia and Poland requested a consultation with other NATO members last week after around 20 Russian drones crossed into Poland and Russian MiG-31 jets entered Estonian airspace in a separate incident. Romania, another NATO member, also said a Russian drone had breached its airspace. And as we learned earlier in the show, it's happening over Alaska as well. So, what can I tell you? Put it all on the record and note that we have no coordinated answer for how to respond to these things so far. Okay, other news. Let me open this one up. It's a Blue Sky post Got to see it in order to make sure it is what I think it is. Yes, Kyle Cheney reporting yesterday from his perch at Politico. I haven't seen a write-up for it yet, but so far, all you need to know is this news. Ken Cheeseborough, an architect of Trump's bid to remain in power despite losing the 2020 election, has been suspended from practicing law in D.C. He'd already been disbarred/suspended in several other states. So now D.C. as well, and we'll see whether it's something Trump thinks he can pardon or not. He may just try to intervene and say, no, I pardon you from that, and I'm taking over the D.C. bar as well. Not normally something that anybody would allow the President of the United States to do, but there's this thing, the Supreme Court, which might just get in the way of all of that and overturn all of your previous understanding of how life and the law works in this country. Some interesting commentary on Russ Vought's threats from the OMB to fire everybody during the next government shutdown. Interesting observation upon observation. Josh Marshall noting of this news that he says, look, this seems to be their angle. If there's a shutdown, they won't furlough employees. They'll fire them permanently. The fact that this is illegal kind of isn't the point these days. I don't see why this is much of a threat. They don't have to do this. It's a choice. They run the government when things go wrong. I guess this is the point, as he's saying. When things start to break and people get mad, it's on them. Their economy, their government services, all on them. Votes a degenerate criminal. Let him do it. Interesting perspective. I know it'll bring a lot of pain and misery. And by the way, let me also tie it to something else. We haven't been speaking yet about the effort to indict James Comey. That too, another one of Trump's enemies that he wants to bring the weight of the law down on. They're trying desperately, of course, they've been trying desperately to indict everybody else. This all happening in the context of the failure to be able to indict by grand jury in D.C. On a number of protesters that have been scooped up during the federal occupation, and the troops' occupation of D.C. No success for Jeanine Pirro in bringing charges, making charges stick against anybody, and even an indictment stick against anybody. So now the question is, will they be able to indict Trump political opponents elsewhere, like in the Eastern District of Virginia, which is based in Alexandria, the close-in suburb of D.C. As you know, the U.S. attorney there recently was forced out in one way or another when he refused to try to bring an indictment against Letitia James there. Now, the named replacement, Lindsay Halligan, has just days to try to bring charges against James Comey for God only knows what before the statute of limitations expires, as it turns out. But also she's supposed to do the job against Letitia James if she, is able to do that. Now the question is, there's very little question about whether she'll attempt to bring this to a grand jury. Now the question is, will a grand jury in Alexandria return the same kinds of results as grand juries in D.C. have been returning? And maybe yes, maybe no, but if you're trying to charge James Comey, Alexandria is chock full of federal workers too. Probably, I would guess, actually, maybe the concentration of federal workers living in the Eastern District of Virginia may even be higher than the concentration of those living inside D.C. So maybe, maybe not. Now, on the other hand, there may be some disgruntled ex-FBI employees that make their way onto the grand jury and may say, he should have been indicted for what he did to Hillary Clinton in 2016. So I don't know, maybe. But they'll probably separate the issues in their minds. They're capable of doing that. But yeah, it's not Trump-friendly ground. And if you also are threatening to shut down the government and fire everybody rather than furlough them, well, that grand jury pool in Alexandria is full of people who are not going to look favorably upon that either. So if jury nullification is a thing you're actually worried about, you're going to have to keep an eye on things there. But Josh's point, of course, here is, look, if they shut down the government and fire everybody, that's going to make them look terrible. Maybe you should just let them do it. It is interesting, though, that he says, look, he's a degenerate criminal and all that. Now, Greg Green, who we're also always big fans of in everything that he does, but in particular on social media, points out Marshall calls Vogt a degenerate criminal for his threats to maul the people's government, and he's right. But the truth is even more galling. Assent to our crimes against the Constitution, Vogt now demands, or else I'll commit further such crimes. He revels in flouting his oath, that is, to take care that the laws be faithfully executed and be faithful to the Constitution. Vogt's threat all but calls forth Lincoln's, Abraham's, the original Lincoln. Lincoln's searing argument at Cooper Union. Ready for this one? Here's a good quote. Plainly stated, you will destroy the government, you Confederates or potential Confederates. You will destroy the government unless you be allowed to construe and enforce the Constitution as you please on all points in dispute between you and us. You will rule or ruin in all events. Wow. Rather poignant. Yes. If anything, though, Greg continues, I've given Vogt too much credit. He's not seeking to construe the Constitution as he wishes. He seeks to ring in the post-constitutional moment that he claims the country is already in, employing any means necessary. Wow. And borrowing from an article there as a source, Renewing American Purpose is the name of the piece in AmericanMind.org. And I guess that's probably some exposition of Vogt's position that we're post-constitutional now anyway. What's the point in trying to hammer this into constitutional shape? So we have a faithless rogue sitting at the heart of the executive branch, toying with the people's government and the laws that shape it as if they were his to play with. That's a good point and quite dangerous. And perhaps we'll be reading into that even further in the coming days if he, in fact, launches his attack, his next level of attack against the federal government. All right. Judd Legum, likewise, by the way, making a similar point in pointing out this idea of furloughing everybody, firing everybody rather than furloughing them. Is this supposed to be a threat? They did this exact thing when the government was open, right? So that does tend to diminish the threat of it. And lastly, we will add this. Well, we really should have spent more time on this one. But I very timely kept you up to date on Ryan Walters in Oklahoma, the superintendent of education there, who was trying to put a Charlie Kirk statue on every campus, every college campus in Oklahoma, and make a part of the curriculum such that every public high school in Oklahoma would have a Turning Point USA chapter. Well, two very ambitious things. I don't know whether he's going to get much in the way of sponsorship or agreement inside the Oklahoma legislature or not. It's hard to tell. What was he up to? Also hard to tell. Will it matter? Now harder than ever to tell as Ryan Walters steps down from his job as Oklahoma Superintendent of Public Instruction, a statewide elected position, by the way, in order to move into, I guess, well, he says the private sector, but the private sector that he's talking about is paid activism on the same front. He will be joining one of the anti-teachers unions organizations out there, an astroturfed organization, to fight against God only knows what. Why would he be leaving? Well, one thing we didn't remind you of the other day when we were recapping Ryan Walters' foibles is that he's currently under investigation for an incident in an online meeting with other state officials in which there was visible pornography playing on his computer desktop in the middle of the meeting. We did mention that, didn't we? I mean, I think so. The Oklahoma County Sheriff delivers the Walters investigation to the DA fairly recently. That actually goes back to August 15th. And I guess we may have noted in passing at the time, but if we didn't, this could also help explain why in the middle of these allegedly major initiatives to change these things and driving Charlie Kirk, centering Charlie Kirk in Oklahoma's instruction curriculum, he would nonetheless walk out in the middle. Oklahoma County Sheriff's Office, back on August 15th, has noted that they concluded their investigation of Ryan Walters and turned over the results to the Oklahoma County District Attorney, according to statements from both offices. Walters is the, of course, Oklahoma Superintendent of Public Instruction, a statewide elected position. Only not now he isn't. He's resigning. 2 members of the State Board of Education, Becky Carlson and Ryan Dethridge, have insisted that they saw moving images of fully nude women on the TV in Walters' conference room during an executive session in late July and had to tell him to turn it off multiple times. Interesting. Multiple times, really. And, of course, you may remember he claimed, I don't know how to do it. It's not working. Walters has denied those allegations in subsequent statements and falsely claimed that he had been cleared even before the investigation had been completed. The conflict between that episode and the issues Walters has pursued in public was jarring, to say the least. And now he's not going to be pursuing any of them anyway. I'm leaving to take a new job in an organization no one has ever heard of, but importantly, he emphasized it was attacking teachers' unions. That's going to be his new passion, instead of, his statewide elective office. Apparently, the governor there, term limited this time around. Maybe he's setting himself up for a race there.
You have been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
All right, a little wide-ranging and jarring and discombobulated today, but we got tomorrow to help clean things up and announce a few things that we haven't gotten to. But in the meantime, Justice Putnam does so on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, starting, though, of course, where we had to, with the meltdown in front of the UN and the U.S. fighter jets scrambling over Alaska.